Baltimore, January 13th, 1999. A cold wind whips through the trees, snow crunches underfoot. It's a day like any other, but for one family, this day will become a nightmare. This is Hae Min Lee, a bright, beautiful 18-year-old with a promising future. She's a senior at Woodlawn High School, popular and loved by many. But Hae Min Lee has a secret love affair with a charismatic young man named Adnan Syed. Their relationship is a whirlwind of passion, jealousy, and hidden trysts. Today, Hae Min Lee disappears, vanishes without a trace. Her family reports her missing, their worry growing with each passing hour. Where could she be? Had she run away? Or had something terrible happened? The police begin their investigation. They question Hae Min Lee's friends, family, and of course her secret boyfriend, Adnan Syed. He claims he last saw her at school that day and has no idea where she could be. But something doesn't add up. Adnan's story is full of holes and inconsistencies. The police are suspicious. Could this charming young man be hiding a dark secret? A break in the case. A mysterious phone call made on the day Hae Min Lee disappeared. The call leads police to a desolate park on the outskirts of town, Leakin Park, a place of shadows and secrets. It's here, buried in a shallow grave, that police make a gruesome discovery. The body of Hae Min Lee, her life cut short, her future stolen. Now the investigation takes a sinister turn. This is no longer a missing persons case. It's murder. Hae Min Lee, a name whispered on the wind, a life remembered in faded photographs. She was the golden girl, the girl who seemed to have it all, a star athlete, a dedicated student. Her laughter echoed through the halls of Woodlawn High, her smile, a beacon of warmth. She was everything Adnan Syed wasn't. He was the brooding one, the mysterious one, and yet he was drawn to her light. They met in the halls of Woodlawn High. Their eyes met across a crowded room. And so began a love story destined for tragedy. At first it was secret, stolen glances, secret notes passed in the library, the thrill of the forbidden, she, a Korean American, he, Pakistani American. Their cultures clashed and blended in a beautiful tapestry, but their love was a secret they couldn't keep forever. Their families wouldn't understand, their traditions too different. But in each other's arms they found solace, a world where only they existed. But like all teenage romances, theirs was a roller coaster. Ups and downs, highs and lows, the intensity of their feelings, both exhilarating and exhausting. There were arguments, jealousy, the pressures of keeping their love a secret weighing on them. Hae Min Lee began to pull away. She needed space, time to think. Adnan Syed couldn't understand. He was losing her, and the thought of it was unbearable. January 13th, 1999. A date etched in tragedy. Hae Min Lee went about her day as usual. She attended classes, laughed with friends, but something was different. A shadow hung over her. She was supposed to pick up her little cousin from school, but she never showed up. The hours ticked by. Fear turned to panic. Where was Hae Min Lee? The disappearance of Hae Min Lee sent shockwaves through Baltimore. A young life snatched away, a family left in pieces. The police faced a mountain of questions and a ticking clock. Every lead, a dead end. Every witness, another piece of the puzzle. But the puzzle remained unsolved. Time slipped through their fingers like sand. Days turned into weeks. Hope began to dwindle. Hae Min Lee was gone, but the search for answers had just begun. Adnan Syed, the ex-boyfriend, the one who once shared Hae's laughter, now a figure of suspicion. He cooperated with police, answered their questions, but something about his demeanor rubbed them the wrong way. His story, a tangle of contradictions. His alibi, shaky at best. The police dug deeper, into his life, his relationships, and what they found cast a dark shadow over Adnan Syed. The evidence was circumstantial. Phone records, witness testimonies, pieces of a puzzle that seemed to point in one direction. A payphone call made on the day of Hae's disappearance. A call traced back to Adnan Syed, his cell phone pinging near Leakin Park, the same park where Hae's body was found. Coincidence? Or something more sinister? Then came Jay, a friend of Adnan, a witness with a story to tell. A story that would send shockwaves through the investigation. Jay claimed Adnan had confessed to him, confessed to killing Hae Min Lee in a fit of rage. He led police to the place where Adnan allegedly showed him Hae's body. His testimony was damning. But was Jay telling the truth, or was he a man with his own secrets, manipulating the investigation for his own gain? The walls were closing in on Adnan Syed. The police were certain they had their man. The evidence, though circumstantial, painted a compelling picture. He was arrested, charged with first-degree murder. His fate now rested in the hands of a jury. The trial was a media circus. The public was captivated by the story of the golden girl and the boyfriend accused of her murder. Adnan Syed maintained his innocence. But would the jury believe him? The air crackled with tension. Every eye in the room was fixed on the proceedings, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. The courtroom was filled with a mix of anticipation and dread, as the fate of a young man hung in the balance. The weight of the evidence, the gravity of the charges was palpable. Each piece of evidence presented seemed to add another layer of complexity to the case. The attorneys meticulously laid out their arguments, each side hoping to sway the jury in their favor. Adnan Syed, a young man on trial for his life, sat at the defense table, his expression a mix of resolve and anxiety. His future was uncertain, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The courtroom drama unfolded around him, each moment bringing him closer to a verdict that would change his life forever. The prosecution, led by Kevin Ulick, presented a case built on circumstantial evidence. They painted a picture of guilt, using every tool at their disposal to convince the jury of Adnan's culpability. The evidence, though not direct, was compelling, and the prosecution's narrative was clear and forceful. Phone records, witness testimony, and the chilling story told by Jay formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. Each piece of evidence was scrutinized, each witness's words dissected. The story that emerged was one of betrayal and murder, a tale that gripped the courtroom and left everyone on edge. The defense, headed by Cristina Gutierrez, fought tooth and nail. They challenged every piece of evidence, questioned every witness, and sought to cast doubt on the prosecution's narrative. Gutierrez's arguments were passionate and relentless, her determination to prove Adnan's innocence evident in every word she spoke. Highlighting inconsistencies, raising doubts about Jay's credibility, and painting Adnan as a victim of circumstance, the defense sought to unravel the prosecution's case. They pointed out the flaws in the evidence, the gaps in the story, and the possibility that Adnan was being wrongfully accused. The jury, 12 ordinary citizens, held Adnan's fate in their hands. Their task was monumental, their responsibility immense. They listened intently to every word, weighed every piece of evidence, and considered the arguments from both sides with the utmost seriousness. Their faces, a mix of concentration and uncertainty, reflected the gravity of their task. Each juror knew that their decision would have profound consequences, not just for Adnan, but for the entire community. The pressure was immense, the responsibility daunting. Their verdict would have life-altering consequences. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the jury deliberated. Every moment felt like an eternity, the outcome uncertain. When the jury finally returned with their decision, the entire room held its breath, knowing that the next few moments would change lives forever. Section 2. The prosecution's case. Ulick paced before the jury, his voice a mix of confidence and indignation. He painted a picture of a jealous ex-boyfriend driven to murder. He presented the cell phone records, calls made near the time and location of Hae's burial. Calls that placed Adnan at the scene. He called Jay to the stand. His story, despite its inconsistencies, was damaging. He spoke of Adnan's confession, his help in disposing of Hae's body. The prosecution rested. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The image of Hae, her life cut short, hung heavy in the air. Section 3. The defense fights back. Cristina Gutierrez rose to her feet. A force to be reckoned with, she dissected the prosecution's case piece by piece. She attacked Jay's credibility, exposing his lies, his motives, his ever-changing story. He wasn't a reliable witness, he was an opportunist. She argued that the police had tunnel vision. They focused on Adnan from the start, ignoring other leads, failing to pursue other suspects. She maintained Adnan's innocence. He was a good kid, a model student, a victim of circumstance. Section 4. A shocking verdict. The jury deliberated for 2 days. 2 days of anguish for both families. 2 days that felt like a lifetime. The verdict came on a cold February day. The foreman stood, guilty. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Adnan, his face a mask of shock and disbelief, was led away in handcuffs. Hae's family wept. Justice for Hae, but at what cost? Section 5. The aftermath. Adnan Syed was sentenced to life in prison, a life stolen, a future lost. But the story didn't end there. The case faded from the headlines, but questions remained. Doubts lingered. Had justice been served? Or had an innocent man been wrongfully convicted? Years later, the Serial podcast would reignite the case, bringing it to the attention of millions, casting doubt on the verdict and raising more questions than answers. In 2014, a podcast gripped the nation. Serial, hosted by Sarah Koenig, dug deep into the murder of Hae Min Lee. It reopened old wounds and forced the world to ask, what if we got it wrong? Millions tuned in, captivated by Koenig's investigation. Her voice, a calm amidst the storm, guided listeners through the twists and turns of the case. She re-examined the evidence, interviewed key players, and uncovered inconsistencies that had been overlooked or ignored. The case that had once seemed open and shut was suddenly anything but. Serial raised serious questions about the reliability of key witness testimony. Jay's story, the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, crumbled under scrutiny. His account was riddled with holes. His timeline shifted with each telling. He contradicted himself time and time again. Why did Jay lie? Was he pressured by police? Or did he have something to hide? Serial didn't offer easy answers. It forced listeners to confront the uncomfortable truth. Memory is malleable. Truth is elusive. Serial also highlighted the gaps in the investigation, leads that were never pursued, evidence that was never found. Where was the physical evidence linking Adnan to the crime? No DNA, no fingerprints, just a web of circumstantial evidence. What about the other potential suspects? The unknown calls from Adnan's cell phone, the threats Hae had received, were these ever fully investigated? The more Koenig dug, the more questions she uncovered. The case was a puzzle with missing pieces. Serial didn't prove Adnan Syed's innocence, but it did raise reasonable doubt. Doubt that echoed through courtrooms and living rooms across America. Adnan maintained his innocence. He fought for years to appeal his conviction. The legal battles were long and arduous. Finally, in 2022, a judge vacated his conviction. He was released from prison. But the story is far from over. The prosecution has the option to retry the case. Adnan's future remains uncertain. The case of Hae Min Lee and Adnan Syed is a tragedy. It's a story that has gripped the nation, a tale of young love, untimely death, and a legal battle that has spanned decades. The events that unfolded in 1999 have left an indelible mark on everyone involved, from the families of Hae and Adnan to the detectives, lawyers, and journalists who have tried to piece together the truth. A young life cut short, another life forever altered. Hae Min Lee was a bright, promising high school student with dreams and aspirations. Her sudden disappearance and subsequent discovery of her body in Leakin Park shattered her family and friends. Adnan Syed, her ex-boyfriend, was arrested and convicted of her murder, a conviction that has been the subject of intense scrutiny and debate ever since, and a web of questions that may never be fully unraveled. The evidence presented at trial was circumstantial, and many believe it was insufficient to prove Adnan's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The case has been plagued by inconsistencies, unreliable witness testimonies, and potential misconduct by law enforcement. Each piece of evidence seems to raise more questions than it answers. Did the justice system get it right? The jury found Adnan guilty, but the verdict has been contested by many who argue that the trial was flawed. The appeals process has been long and arduous, with new evidence and testimonies coming to light over the years. The question of whether justice was truly served remains a point of contention. Or did it fail both Hae and Adnan? Was Adnan wrongfully convicted? The possibility that an innocent man has spent years behind bars is a haunting thought. Advocates for Adnan argue that he was the victim of a biased investigation and an overzealous prosecution. They point to alternative suspects and overlooked evidence that could have exonerated him. Or was he a master manipulator who got away with murder? Some believe that Adnan's calm demeanor and articulate defense are signs of a calculating mind. They argue that he had the motive and opportunity to commit the crime and that his conviction was justified. The truth, however, remains elusive. Serial didn't provide easy answers. The groundbreaking podcast brought the case into the public eye, sparking widespread interest and debate. Host Sarah Koenig meticulously examined the evidence, interviewed key players, and presented a narrative that captivated millions. Yet despite the in-depth investigation, the podcast left listeners with more questions than answers. It forced us to confront the complexities of the justice system, the limits of memory. Witnesses' recollections can be unreliable, and the passage of time can distort the truth. The case highlighted the challenges of relying on human memory in legal proceedings and the potential for error in the justice system, and the human capacity for both good and evil. The case of Hae Min Lee and Adnan Syed is a stark reminder of the duality of human nature. It shows how love can turn to tragedy, how justice can be both served and denied, and how the search for truth can reveal the best and worst in people. The case remains a stain on the conscience of Baltimore. The city has been haunted by the events of 1999, and the case has become a symbol of the broader issues within the criminal justice system. It has sparked conversations about race, class, and the reliability of the legal process. A reminder that truth is often elusive. Despite the years of investigation, debate, and legal battles, the full truth of what happened to Hae Min Lee may never be known. The case serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities and uncertainties that often accompany the pursuit of justice. And that justice sometimes is a matter of perspective. What one person sees as a clear-cut case of guilt, another may view as errant injustice. The case of Hae Min Lee and Adnan Syed challenges us to consider the nuances of truth and the multifaceted nature of justice. It asks us to reflect on our own beliefs and biases, and to recognize that the search for justice is often a journey without a definitive end. But amidst the legal battles and the media frenzy, the world seemed to forget the heart of the matter. One crucial question remains: what happened to Hae Min Lee? Her disappearance and subsequent death left a void that has never been filled. Her story was overshadowed by the trial, the legal proceedings, and the media circus that followed. The focus shifted from Hae, the person, to the sensationalism of the case, her voice lost in the noise, drowned out by the clamor for headlines and the rush to judgment. The media frenzy turned her tragic story into a spectacle. She was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. Hae Min Lee was a young woman with dreams, aspirations, and a life full of potential. Her family and friends remember her not just for the tragedy that befell her, but for the joy and love she brought into their lives. They remember her laughter, her kindness, and her spirit. Her family still searches for answers, for closure. They have been living with the pain and uncertainty for over 2 decades, hoping that one day the truth will come to light, for a sense of peace that has eluded them for over 2 decades. The grief they carry is a heavy burden, one that time has not lessened. The case of Hae Min Lee is a reminder that behind every true crime story, there are real people, real lives forever changed by the events of that fateful January day. real lives forever changed by the events of that fateful January day. The impact of her loss is felt not just by her family, but by everyone who knew her. And while the search for answers may continue, the quest for justice remains a long and arduous journey. The investigators and detectives who have worked tirelessly on the case are still seeking the truth. One thing is certain: Hae Min Lee will never be forgotten. Her memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved her, and her story continues to resonate with people around the world. The hope is that one day the full truth will be revealed, and Hae Min Lee will finally rest in peace.